Mesdames et messieurs, la cérémonie va bientôt commencer. Nous vous prions de bien vouloir vous asseoir et mettre vos téléphones en mode silencieux. Les issues de secours sont situées sur les côtés et au fond de la salle, signalées par un panneau de sortie vert. Ladies and gentlemen, the ceremony is about to start. Please take your seats and switch your phones to silent mode. The emergency exits are located on the sides and back of the room. You can follow the green exit signs.
Mesdames et messieurs, bonsoir. Ce soir, dans cette salle, nous sommes tous des privilégiés. Et vous également, qui nous regardez en direct sur les pages Facebook Live de la Fondation L'Oréal, de l'UNESCO et du magazine Elle. Mon privilège ce soir, c'est de vous présenter 5 femmes exceptionnelles dont la carrière et le travail vont être récompensés. Mais ce soir, tous ensemble, nous avons un privilège plus grand encore. Ce soir, nous allons découvrir demain. Chacune de ces femmes de science défriche, invente et crée notre futur. En partageant avec nous leurs travaux, elles vont ouvrir une fenêtre sur ce que pourra peut-être être notre monde. Évidemment, ce futur nous concerne tous. Il devra être construit par des hommes et des femmes. C'est une question d'égalité et de nécessité. Mais pour ce faire, nous devons mettre en avant les contributions des femmes à la science. C'est une question de justice et d'honnêteté. Les héros de la science sont aussi des héroïnes. Il nous faut aussi susciter et conforter les vocations des jeunes femmes de science, C'est une question d'éducation et de pragmatisme. Il serait quand même dommage de décourager la prochaine Einstein. Ce soir, nous honorons donc des femmes de science, car la Fondation L'Oréal et l'UNESCO ont une conviction qui est aussi une évidence. Le monde a besoin de la science, et la science a besoin des femmes, parce que les femmes de science ont le pouvoir de changer le monde. Ce soir, l'avenir est en avant-première. Et en célébrant ces femmes, nous contribuons aussi tous ensemble à créer un futur un peu plus équilibré et donc plus durable. Merci à vous d'être ici et bienvenue à la 19e cérémonie de remise des prix L'Oréal UNESCO pour les femmes et la science. La science est une composante de nos cultures. C'est une question d'éducation et d'égalité, autant de valeurs qui sont au cœur de la mission de l'UNESCO. Sa directrice générale, Madame Irina Bokova, ne pouvait pas être parmi nous ce soir, mais elle a tenu à nous laisser un message.
Monsieur Jean-Paul Agon, cher ami président directeur général de L'Oréal, Mesdames les lauréates, toutes mes félicitations. Mesdames et messieurs, chers amis, je suis très émue de m'adresser à vous ce soir pour cette nouvelle édition du prix L'Oréal UNESCO, ma dernière en qualité de directrice générale. Depuis près de 20 ans, L'Oréal et l'UNESCO ont construit un projet unique, par son ampleur, par ses valeurs, par son impact. Ce programme a fait émerger une nouvelle génération de femmes scientifiques, plus de 100 lauréates, des milliers de boursières à travers le monde. Toutes, dans leur discipline, ont repoussé les frontières de la connaissance, ont brisé le plafond de verre qui freine encore trop de femmes et de filles dans le monde. Mesdames Elizabeth Blackburn et Ada Yonath, après avoir été récompensées, ont obtenu le prix Nobel. Madame Amina Gurib Fakim, lauréate en 2007, est aujourd'hui présidente de la République de Maurice. Chacune de vous est unique et compte d'une voix singulière. Chacune d'entre vous entraîne avec elle des milliers d'autres voix de filles et de femmes qui aspirent au respect, à l'égalité, à l'excellence. Ladies and gentlemen, each and every UNESCO L'Oréal laureate is an inspiration to me and to girls and to women across the world to work harder to promote and recognize the contribution of women to science. Each is a role model to young women in schools, in universities, in laboratories, far beyond the wall of this ceremony hall. Each shows us that humanity as a whole cannot prosper with only 50% of its creative genius. This is not right, and it's not smart either. I wish to thank each of them for their courage and their determination, for pushing forward the boundaries of both science and gender equality. But the truth is, this ceremony is not about giving prizes only. This is really a call to action for every girl and every woman to be empowered at every level, in learning, in research, in administration, and in teaching across all scientific fields. I thank L'Oréal for partnering with UNESCO to carry this message around the world. Our message is simple and powerful, and it has never been so important. The world needs science. Science needs women. Thank you.
La science et l'égalité sont aussi les valeurs qui animent la Fondation L'Oréal. Et pour ouvrir cette soirée, c'est donc tout naturellement que j'invite Monsieur Jean-Paul Agon, président de la Fondation Générale et président directeur général de L'Oréal.
Excellences, Mesdames les lauréates et boursières, Mesdames, Messieurs, bonsoir, bienvenue. Décidément, notre monde est de plus en plus volatile et incertain et rien ne se passe plus jamais comme prévu. Il y a quelques jours, son Excellence Amina Gurib Fakim, lauréate de notre prix en 2007, et depuis 2015, comme vous l'avez entendu, présidente de la République mauricienne, qui devait être là ce soir, nous apprenait qu'elle ne pouvait se joindre à nous, étant retenue à Maurice par des obligations officielles. Et Irina Bokova, vous l'avez entendu aussi, qui hier encore pensait être parmi nous aujourd'hui, a été appelée en urgence au siège des Nations Unies à New York. Et je sais combien elle souhaitait ardemment être présente ce soir pour sa dernière cérémonie, comme elle vous l'a dit. Elle a tenu à être avec nous à travers ce message pour témoigner de son attachement profond à ce programme. C'est une très grande chance d'avoir pu mener ce combat pour la science avec une femme comme Irina. Engagée, passionnée, courageuse, avec beaucoup d'énergie et de conviction, elle a insufflé à notre partenariat un immense enthousiasme et une volonté précieuse, celle de faire toujours avancer les choses, toujours guidée par une seule et même envie, celle qu'elle partage avec les femmes de science, tenter de changer le monde. Chère Irina, j'espère que vous m'entendez peut-être sur la page Facebook, un très grand et chaleureux merci pour votre contribution. Donc, Amina est retenue à Maurice, Irina est retenue à New York. Bon, vous avez moi. Même si j'ai le défaut d'être le seul homme parmi les trois. Mais, en tous les cas, un homme de longue date rallié à la cause des femmes. Et ce soir, le programme de notre cérémonie reste inchangé. Plus que jamais, célébrer les femmes de science. Il y a une cinquantaine d'années, aux États-Unis, 3 mathématiciennes afro-américaines, employées de la NASA, ont joué un rôle fondamental dans la course à l'espace. Cette histoire vraie est aujourd'hui portée à l'écran dans un film que vous avez peut-être déjà vu et dont le titre est révélateur, « Les figures de l'ombre ». 3 héroïnes écartées pendant des décennies des récits de la conquête spatiale parce que femmes et noires. 3 génies qui ont dû surmonter tous les obstacles pour obtenir d'abord le droit de faire de la science et ensuite d'être reconnus. Pour nous qui sommes engagés dans ce combat pour l'égalité entre les femmes et les hommes, dans la science, cela paraît tout simplement invraisemblable, insupportable. Parce que pour nous, la science, l'intelligence, la créativité n'ont pas de sexe. Chaque année, à l'occasion de cette remise de prix, nous réaffirmons notre engagement envers les femmes de science. À mes yeux, cet événement est bien plus qu'une cérémonie. C'est un acte de foi, une promesse, celle de donner toute sa puissance à la science grâce à la contribution accrue des femmes. Pour que plus personne ne pense que le progrès scientifique ou technique peut se faire sans elles, pour qu'elles puissent servir d'exemple, d'inspiratrice, de guide, pour qu'aucune femme qui en a les capacités et la vocation ne se trouve écartée de l'activité scientifique. Tolstoï disait « Femmes, c'est vous qui tenez entre vos mains le salut du monde ». Chaque année, quand nous découvrons les travaux des lauréates des boursières et les boursières, nous avons ce sentiment que les femmes de science ont effectivement le pouvoir de changer le monde. De nouvelles frontières dépassées, des limites explosées, l'impossible devenu possible. La science ne s'endort jamais, ne se répète jamais. Elle nous maintient en tension et fait progresser l'humanité. Nous aurons le destin que nous aurons mérité, disait quant à lui Albert Einstein. C'est à notre destin collectif qu'œuvrent toutes les femmes récompensées ce soir, et nous leur devons beaucoup. Elles nous ouvrent les horizons vertigineux de la science et démontrent les innombrables applications de la recherche dans notre quotidien. Des femmes exceptionnelles, brillantes, courageuses, au parcours quelquefois intrépide, parfois aussi des figures de l'ombre, elles aussi, que ce programme a le mérite de mettre en lumière. Surtout, la science qu'elles incarnent est susceptible d'attirer les jeunes générations et de susciter des vocations, car c'est aussi notre dessein. Après 19 ans d'existence, plus de 2700 chercheuses reconnues dans 115 pays, lauréat l'UNESCO pour les femmes et la science reste un programme unique, inégalé, pas seulement, bien sûr, une apothéose, mais surtout un tremplin. Un programme présent tout au long de la chaîne des savoirs, récompensant des chercheuses de haut niveau que nous accompagnons, nous encourageons et nous faisons connaître dans le monde entier, mais aussi en s'intéressant à celles qui ne sont encore qu'à l'orée d'un grand parcours. Et en allant même plus loin d'ailleurs maintenant, avec le volet pour les filles et la science, puisque ce sont maintenant les lycéennes et les étudiantes, plus de 15 000 en un an, qui découvrent l'intérêt des études scientifiques grâce au travail de terrain de nos ambassadrices. Ainsi, la communauté pour les femmes et la science ne cesse de grandir. Rassemblée par la science, par essence universelle. Beaucoup de nos anciennes lauréates s'impliquent aussi d'ailleurs dans les bourses nationales, un bel exemple de mentoring qui donne toute sa force au programme. La mise en lumière des chercheuses bénéficie aussi à l'image de la science. Elle n'a ni religion, ni politique, ni frontières, ni guerre. Elle est aujourd'hui la seule capable d'unir des gens très différents. Je voudrais ici aussi aujourd'hui rendre hommage à 3 figures emblématiques de notre programme qui nous ont malheureusement quittés cette année. Le professeur Ahmed Zewail, président du jury des sciences du vivant, prix Nobel en 1999, un homme d'une grande pugnacité qui connaissait bien les problématiques des pays en voie de développement. Deborah Jean, lauréate en 2013, pressentie pour le Nobel, est disparue l'année dernière à 47 ans après une courageuse bataille contre le cancer. Et Mildred Dresselhaus, lauréate en 2007, une grande physicienne américaine, The Queen of Carbon, connue aussi pour son combat en faveur des femmes dans la carrière scientifique. De grandes pertes pour la communauté, pour les femmes et la science, et pour le monde scientifique. Mais aussi maintenant des étoiles qui continueront à nous guider sur notre chemin. Car notre course vers l'égalité hommes-femmes en sciences, notre conquête spatiale à nous, elle n'est pas terminée. Mais nous savons que nous sommes sur la bonne voie. Et surtout, nous sommes pleins d'optimisme, pleins de volonté et déterminés à ne jamais baisser les bras. Dans un monde où les défis, très clairement, se multiplient, la science mérite toute notre confiance. Il est plus que jamais urgent et nécessaire d'enrôler de plus en plus de femmes dans les rangs de la recherche. Partagée, maîtrisée, mise au service des populations, seule la science est à même de répondre aux enjeux majeurs du XXIe siècle. Nos chercheuses en sont la preuve, elles qui donnent à la science toute sa noblesse. Je vous remercie tous ce soir, ici, de participer à cette cérémonie qui leur est consacrée. Merci.
Merci, Monsieur Agon. Ce programme unique dont M. Agon vous a parlé a déjà récompensé plus de 92 femmes de science issues du monde entier, dont certaines sont parmi nous ce soir. 2 de ces lauréates, Mme Bokova vous l'a rappelé, ont même ensuite eu un prix Nobel, ce qui, évidemment, ne met aucune pression aux 5 chercheuses qui s'apprêtent à rejoindre cette liste prestigieuse. Ce sont 5 scientifiques qui ont fait le choix de la science de la matière, un domaine où les femmes sont particulièrement peu représentées. Quelle que soit leur culture ou leur parcours, elles représentent chacune une certaine idée du progrès. Ce soir, ce sont leurs travaux, mais également elles, que nous honorons. Mesdames et messieurs, voici les lauréates du prix L'Oréal UNESCO pour les femmes et la science 2017. Ces chercheuses sont des aventurières, car la science est une aventure. Ce sont des pionnières qui défrichent des lieux mystérieux et vont dans des univers dont nous ignorons tout. Ce sont également des précurseuses. Et oui, ça se dit. Car leurs travaux vont pouvoir changer nos vies à plus ou moins long terme. Ce soir, elles vont partager avec nous ces découvertes qui les passionnent, ces mystères qui les animent, et ainsi nous parler de science, mais peut-être aussi un peu de nous. Elles vont nous emmener du stellaire au quantique, de l'atome à l'électron. L'avenir est un vaste programme. Et cet avenir, justement, se déroule peut-être au-dessus de nos têtes, dans l'immensité étoilée de l'univers. Et c'est justement là que se situe le laboratoire de notre première lauréate. Car pour elle, l'univers est une merveille à contempler, mais également à interroger.
It was a night with no moon, where the Milky Way covers the whole sky, and almost, I was part of it. And, at that moment I said, okay, this is something I really know nothing about, and it's really fascinating. And if I can, I will make my best effort to become an astronomer.
Ces questions amènent parfois des rencontres inoubliables. Et notre première lauréate en a fait une avec un astre pas comme les autres. Avant cela, elle a été la première femme diplômée en astronomie dans son Chili natal et également la première femme à recevoir un doctorat en astrophysique à l'université de Princeton. Elle est aujourd'hui directrice du département d'astronomie de l'université du Chili. Merci d'accueillir le professeur Maria Teresa Ruiz.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Are Martians really green? Why? Like that, many questions filled my mind when I was growing up. Some of them were answered by grown-ups around me, but some I realized I had to answer them by myself. In a time when there was no television in my country, nor internet, this curiosity was what really fed my desire to become a scientist. And with the support of my family, and in particular my grandmother, who always told me repeatedly that being a woman was not a good excuse not to follow your dreams. And I did that. I followed my dream. I became a scientist, and in my case, an astronomer. I started by getting an undergraduate degree in astronomy in the University of Chile in Chile, and then I went for a PhD at the Astrophysical Science Department in Princeton. There I had the good luck of having the most powerful computer to do my research, and also my advisor was the very prestigious theoretical astrophysicist, Martin Schwarzschild. So I work on my thesis in models, kinematical models of galaxies. After a PhD, I went for a postdoctorate to Trieste and then to Mexico, and I didn't find a powerful computer like I had at Princeton, so I had to change topics. And in Mexico, I found a very good group, very active in the research of nebula, ionized nebula, and started collaborating with them. But in 1979, I simply decided to go back home. And I went back to Chile, and to find the country in a very difficult situation. There was a military dictatorship there, and the university, well, like usually in these cases, one of the first victims is the press and the university and science. So I found that there were no journals, subscription to journals, no support to go to conferences. So we were in the dark. I was in the dark. I didn't know. If you're a scientist, you have to know what others are doing in the subject. So I had to find, a niche, a way to contribute. And one bright point was, being a Chilean, I could have access to the most powerful telescopes in the Southern Hemisphere. This is the La Silla Observatory, the European Observatory, and this is the American Observatory. And these large telescopes were being used at the time to observe the faraway universe. And I decided, okay, I'm going to concentrate on the nearby universe, our neighborhood, that very faint objects there need these very large telescopes. So I started working there, and the way to detect these very nearby objects was to take plates, for example, and compare them with a photographic plate taken maybe 10 years before. And the objects that move with respect to the rest of the stars are the nearby ones. And if you select the very faint ones, then you are observing this faint nearby population of stars. Among them, one that really interests me were the white dwarfs. These are stars that are the solid remains of stars like the sun. When they run out of fuel, they become like a hot rock that really slowly cools down. They are interesting objects by themselves, but one of the interesting things you can learn from them is, for example, determining the age of the galaxy. And if you cannot find a white dwarf that is cooler than a certain temperature, you can apply cooling models that are available to try to understand, and determine the age of the system. I was doing that and observing at La Silla these degenerate stars, and one day I observed something very different. I couldn't tell what it was. It didn't look like a star. It didn't look like a white dwarf or these dead stars. And after thinking a little bit about it, in a few minutes, I realized I was looking at an object that is more like a planet, like a giant planet. And these objects have a mass that is less than 70 times the mass of Jupiter. And for many years, we didn't know whether they existed, but several searches were producing candidates of these objects that are called brown dwarfs. After this discovery, I started shifting my scientific interest to study brown dwarfs. And for that, I am now using these brown dwarfs just look like planets. And I was using the telescopes in Chile, Paranal, which is the largest optical telescope in Chile, and ALMA, who is a very large interferometer array, to study the variety of brown dwarfs and also the formation of them with ALMA. And more recently, I started getting interested in detecting and studying exoplanets, that mean planets that go around other stars. Of course, the big success or the first prize there would be to find one who can harbor life. And I think we may be able to find it soon. It's a really exciting time for that. And I have had an exciting life. And for that, I would like to thank my husband, Fernando, and my son, Camilo, with whom I share a common life project, and my sister, Rebecca, and her husband, Rafael, all four of them here today, and hundreds of hands that had helped me through all my life, starting from the rest of the family who could not be here, colleagues, friends, my colleagues at the University of Chile, students, they teach you a lot, and teachers, of course, and many, many people I don't even know about. So this is I know that we cannot do things by yourself. I also would like to thank L'Oréal and UNESCO for this award. This is not only a very important and prestigious award, but it means a lot to me because of the purpose of this award. You know, they make this incredible effort to put a team of professionals that went all the way to Chile to take pictures and make videos and train us, and all just to give visibility to the contribution of women to science. And I think that is really very much needed, and I thank you for that. That's really important. Now, I am waiting. My mind is still full of questions. If anything, they have multiplied. And I'm waiting for my grandchildren, curious grandchildren, to come one day and ask me, is there life somewhere else in the universe? And maybe, just maybe, I will be able to answer that. But perhaps if their curiosity is kept alive, it will be up to them to find that. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. No. Thank you. Après avoir eu des étoiles plein les yeux, passons maintenant à fleur de peau. Il est évidemment question de matériaux plastiques et d'électronique.
Design new plastic materials can be used to perform some of the electrical functions, but adding stretching properties, biodegradable properties, and self-healing properties that our human skin has. We're going to open up new possibilities, new opportunities to make electronics in a form that didn't exist previously.
Évidemment, il est question de beaucoup plus que d'écran et juste de plastique. Pour nous l'expliquer, voici la professeure au département de génie chimique de l'université de Stanford que la revue scientifique Nature a désignée en 2015 comme l'une des 10 personnalités ayant un impact considérable sur les sciences, le professeur Zenan Bao.
Good evening, everyone. My parents were scientists. When I was 4 years old, they asked me a question. I guess I was already a scientist at that time because I made a hypothesis and I tested. I thought the ice cream I had was going to sink into water, but instead it floated. Luckily, I got another ice cream. I guess that's why I became a scientist. Now I want to ask you a question. What would you do if you have a flexible screen that can bend? I think the answer is artificial skin. Now, with technology development, we already have flexible screen that can bend and circuits that can fold. That was what I did when I was in Bell Labs more than 10 years ago. But I thought with this knowledge, perhaps I can help people who lost their arms to regain their sense of touch. That's exactly what I decided to do when I moved to Stanford more than 10 years ago. Now you may ask, well, how does smart screen has anything to do with artificial skin? Well, the best memory I had was to hold my baby and touch her soft skin. Imagine if you cannot touch your child's skin. Imagine if you're in the kitchen and you burn yourself, but you can't feel it. That's the life of people who lost their arm. That's the life of people who have skin grafts. Even with technology and medicine development, still those people cannot feel. So human skin is not a straight line. If we can make electronics to be flexible and allow them to have adaptation to curved surfaces, that means they are no longer solid, they are no longer rigid. Then if we can make screen to bend and they can still be functional, that means you can imagine if we make an artificial skin, when they bend, they can still function. But human skin is much more complicated compared to our flexible screen. There are 3 major challenges we need to overcome in order to build an artificial skin. First, we need to develop completely new electronic materials. We need the new electronic materials to be stretchable. That is because skin is soft and skin can move. So if our electronics need to be twisted, need to bend, and still need to be functional, they need to be adaptable and not just flexible, but also stretchable. Second, we need to allow the skin to be able to, and the materials to be able to sense touch. And in order to do that, they need to have the sensitivity and also diversity. It's more than just pressing a button. They need to be able to sense pressure, temperature, pain, and also tenderness, all the wonderful things our skin can feel. So we need to have sensing capabilities. Finally, we need to connect the sensors to the nerve system. All the signal need to be measured and also interpreted by our brain. So that means if our skin can sense, but if our brain cannot understand, then there's no sense of touch. Addressing these challenges have been the main focus of my research group in the past 13 years in Stanford. And with the help of students and collaborators, now we have made a great progress. First, we have to develop new materials, create new matters from molecular levels and up. And from our years of fundamental understanding, we know that chains of atoms makes the basis of matters. When we chain atoms together in different sequences, they give rise to the properties of materials they form. For example, electrical conductivity and stretchability. So here, we needed to design chains and blocks of atoms and link them together using chemical reactions to give the functionality we need for these materials. So now we have materials that can self-repair themselves. They are flexible and stretchable and also biodegradable. Second, we also need these materials to be able to sense. And here, we need them to be highly sensitive, but also at the same time, be able to respond instantaneously to touch. So we designed pyramid-like structures that can change their shapes according to the pressure being applied. When a light pressure is applied, only the tip of the pyramid will be deformed. But when a high pressure is applied, even the base of the pyramid is deformed. And with this, we can detect pressure. We also want to be able to convey the information of temperature through touch. So there, we designed materials that can change their conductivity with temperature. And in this material, the material expands with increased temperature, but the electrical conductivity will decrease with temperature, and this is translated into the temperature information. Finally, we have all the sensors. We need to collect the signal and transmit to the brain. And in our skin, The sensors will measure the external stimulus and transmit through the nerve system to our brain as electrical pulses. So we need to design circuits that can measure the sensing, measure pressure and temperature, and convert the information also into the pulses that our brain can understand. Now we have materials and the sensors that can allow skin grafts and the prosthesis to sense. They also enable other applications. They can, for example, they can allow batteries to be safer using the temperature detecting materials. They can allow electronics to last longer using the self-repairing materials. And even robots and the machine can now feel. Now, my parents are not my only science partners. I work with chemists, physicists, biologists, engineers. I work with people from many different backgrounds. I truly believe in order for science to make progress, we need to have diversity into our field. We need to have people with all different backgrounds, human or scientific, man and woman. Division is not going to make progress, so is short-sightedness. It's our responsibility to welcome everyone into our field. And only then we will be able to truly tackle the most challenging problems that mankind faces. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. La peau artificielle n'est qu'un des exemples de cette science qui va changer nos vies. En réalité, nos vies entières sont impactées par la science. Qui parmi vous peut encore aujourd'hui se passer de son téléphone portable ou de son ordinateur? La puissance de ces outils les rend presque indispensables. Pourtant, cette puissance s'apprête non pas à doubler, mais à être intégralement révolutionnée grâce à l'ordinateur quantique, une révolution technologique de l'ampleur de l'invention de l'imprimerie. Ce qui, évidemment, n'est pas si facile.
Quantum physics is hard. Technology at the forefront of human endeavor is hard. But that is what makes it worthwhile. I strongly believe that the things that are most worthwhile in life are those that are very hard to do. For me, it was better to do the things that have the greatest reward, things that are hard, not easy, and things that will continue to challenge you throughout your life.
Vous l'avez compris, ces difficultés n'arrêtent pas notre prochaine lauréate. Avec ses équipes, elle n'a réalisé pas moins que 2 premières mondiales dans sa discipline. Elle a également été la plus jeune scientifique à avoir été élue à l'Académie des sciences d'Australie à l'âge de 38 ans. Elle est aujourd'hui directrice au Center of Excellence for Quantum Computation and Communication Technology à l'Université de Nouvelle-Galles du Sud. Voici le professeur Michel Simmons.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Mankind's ability to build and create objects that have never existed before are truly exceptional. Imagine taking a Stone Age man and showing him this building. It would tower above him, but when he looked in detail, he would see it was comprised of components that were just bricks, less than a meter in size. Then imagine showing him our aircraft. He'd be astonished. Tons of metal that would be able to get off of the ground. But again, if he looked in detail, he'd see that the components were comprised of metal that was machined with millimeter precision. Then show him our databases. He wouldn't have a clue what they were, but he'd look inside and he'd see racks and racks of silicon electronics. And he'd kind of wonder, what do these things do? And he wouldn't comprehend that they can now perform 1,000,000 billion calculations per second. In order to do this, mankind has figured out how to engineer and manufacture things at the micron scale and below. This is 50 times thinner than the width of a human hair. It's astonishing. This is the digital age, the ones and zeros, the ons and off of our transistors, with billions of transistors that we use to communicate across the world for the internet and connectivity everywhere. My research is trying to look at that into the future. Every time mankind has tried to machine things at smaller and smaller levels, he's opened up complete new worlds. And that's where my research comes in. I now want to go 1,000 times smaller. I want to go down to the atomic scale and try and make electronic devices out of single atoms. At that scale, the whole laws of nature change. We move from classical to quantum physics, and we start to enter the quantum world. Well, in order to be able to do that, we need tools that allow us to both see atoms and manipulate atoms. And this is an example of one of those tools. It's a scanning tunneling microscope. And as with a lot of things in science, it looks very complicated, but its operation is simple. Inside is an ultra-high vacuum system, rather like that you find in outer space. So the only atoms and molecules that we want to look at are the ones that we put in there. We bring down a very fine metal tip towards our surface under voltage control. And when it gets close, electrons tunnel from that tip to the atoms on the surface. We then scan the tip over the atoms, keeping the current constant, hence the term scanning tunneling microscope. And when we do that, we build up a topographic image of what all the atoms on the surface look like. This is the surface of silicon. It's the same silicon that we have in all our electronics. And you can see beautiful rows of pairs of silicon atoms. And what I'm going to describe to you next is something that we have engineered and devised and pioneered in Australia, something nobody else in the world can do. We've taken that scanning tunneling microscope and we've adapted it so that not only can we image atoms, but we can manipulate atoms and place them where we want, and we can build electronic devices at the level of single atoms. In order to be able to do that, we've combined our scanning tunneling microscope on the right-hand side with a silicon crystal growth system on the left-hand side. So we can place the atoms in one machine, transfer them to the other, and then encapsulate them to give them a beautiful crystalline environment. What I'm going to show you now is how we get a single atom into the surface. The first thing we do is we take a silicon crystal and we etch registration markers into the surface that allows us to find where we're going to place our atoms. We put them inside the ultra-high vacuum microscope, reconstruct the surface, and then bring down a layer of hydrogen which acts as our atomic scale mask. We come along with an STM tip and we open up a hole just big enough that when we bring in phosphine gas, which is going to bring in our phosphorus atom, it only absorbs where the hole is. And when we heat the whole surface up, the phosphorus atom goes in, and then we can encapsulate with silicon to give it that beautiful environment. At the same time we open up that hole, we also open up leads, which are also just phosphorus-doped silicon. So the whole thing is now encapsulated with silicon. We take it outside of the ultra-high vacuum environment, and then we put contacts down to it in a kind of Intel-style clean room. And that allows us to find the actual device that we've made, the atom that we've put in there. Now, the exciting thing about this is we're the only group in the world that can make devices at the level of single atoms. We've been able to make a single atom transistor where the functional element is indeed a single atom. We've also been able to make wires that are just 4 atoms wide that are still able to carry current, rather like copper does. And we've now started engineering circuits where we can put individual atoms down and get single electrons to move between those atoms in the circuit that we make. And what we're doing is we're pioneering a whole new route to build a new type of computer called a quantum computer, where the smallest elements are indeed a single atom. In fact, it's not just the atom that we're looking at. We're actually looking at the electron spin on the atom. And we're going to encode information in that electron spin. And in the quantum world, we call this a quantum bit or a qubit. And we're using phosphorus atoms because it has 1 extra electron compared to silicon. And that extra electron is going to be our qubit state. Now, why would we go to all this effort of trying to build devices where we're encoding information on a single spin? And in order to describe this, we've got to consider the difference between the classical world and the quantum world. In the classical world, we have digital information, our ones and zeros, and those are the only 2 states that we encode information in. So imagine sitting at the center of the Earth, If I point to the North Pole, that's my digital 1 of information. And if I point to the South Pole, that's my digital 0 of information. And in the classical world, that's all we use. However, if we now go into the quantum regime, and I consider my electron's spin, it can point to anywhere on the surface of the Earth. So it can point to Paris, or it can point to Chicago. And now this is the part where I might start to lose you. But to describe that state, we can write down a mathematical equation. And that mathematical equation shows that for this spin sitting on the surface of the Earth, in the quantum world, we can have something called superposition. It basically means that that spin is in some fraction, alpha 0, of the down state, and some fraction, alpha 1, of the up state. It's rather like a marriage. We have a system that is entangled. In order to, the important thing to take away from this is to describe that qubit, you need 2 classical bits of information. You need your alpha 0 and alpha 1. If I now bring in another quantum bit and I entangle them, the state of one qubit very much depends on the state of the other. So it's like a marriage. If you flip one, the other one flips the other side down. And in this entangled state, I can now write an equation to describe it. And you can see there are now 4 bits of information, my 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, and 1, 1. And there's 2 things to take away from this. The first one is now with that entangled state, if I perform any operation on it, I'm performing it on all the states at the same time. So now I'm getting access to parallel computing power. Rather than one after the other, it's all at the same time. The second thing is by having 2 quantum bits, I now need 4 classical bits of information to describe it. My alpha 0, alpha 1, alpha 2, and alpha 3. And the beauty of the quantum world is that every time you add a quantum bit, you double the computational power. So here I go from 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32, and so it goes on. And by the time I get to just 300 quantum bits or qubits, I have more power than all the computers in the world connected together. And the significance of that is we'll now be able to do very complex calculations in real time rather than many, many thousands of years. Now, this ability to be able to do those calculations is going to open up a world that we can yet imagine. If you can look at lots of data with lots of variables and do those calculations in parallel, we're going to be able to start to do things real time that we haven't been able to do so far. So some examples of that. We could start to look at drug design and targeting it to the DNA of the patient. We can also start to look at real-time weather forecasting, so we can reduce weather-related deaths, and we could possibly even increase the yield of crops for farmers. And finally, if you look at things like artificial intelligence, we can get our self-driving cars to be able to tell the difference between a tree, a human, or another car on the road. Any industry that has information or huge amounts of data is going to be impacted by this technology. And it's just around the corner. By demonstrating the ability that we can have the capacity to build devices at the atomic scale, and we can move electrons around in those devices exactly where we want, we've done something that 15 years ago was considered nearly impossible. But here we are, the quantum world is upon us. I'm very fortunate. I have an amazing team of people that work with me in Sydney, with lots of fantastic and incredible researchers who've come from all over the world to join us on this journey. As things go forwards, we're going to open up worlds we can't even begin to think of now. I guess one of the key things that I want to leave you with tonight is sometimes, in order to think bigger, it means you actually have to go much, much smaller. And by trying to control the world at smaller and smaller length scales, I believe we open up the capacity for humans to do even greater things. The question is, who knows what world will open up when we finally get there? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. On a coutume de dire que ce qui est petit est mignon. Enfin, en tout cas, je l'espère. Et si c'est vrai, ce sera peut-être le cas aussi maintenant, on pourra dire que ce qui est petit est puissant. C'est vrai pour la puissance de calcul, mais c'est aussi vrai pour les nanomachines.
I'm a strong believer in personalized nanomedicine, especially when it comes to cancer therapy, because cancer is the abnormal growth of your own cells, and nobody have the same cell as somebody else. So if you actually can design nanoparticles for that specific individual, I believe the efficiency of the medicine would be way up.
Grâce aux recherches de cette lauréate, nous entrerons peut-être bientôt dans l'ère de la médecine préventive et personnalisée. Mais si nos organismes sont très différents, nos parcours le sont aussi. Il y a 8 ans, notre prochaine intervenante a quitté les États-Unis, où elle était promise à une brillante carrière, pour participer à l'émergence d'une nouvelle communauté scientifique au Moyen-Orient. Elle est aujourd'hui professeure assistante en chimie organique à l'Université des sciences et technologies du roi Abdullah. Voici le professeur Nivin Kashab.
So bonsoir, good evening everyone. When I first got the news about winning this prestigious award, I directly called my parents to kind of tell them about it. Of course, it took me like 20 to 30 minutes to describe to my mom what winning this award meant. She's an amazing lady, but she thinks I'm a medical doctor. It's really hard to describe what doing science or being a researcher really means. Both of my parents did not get a university education. Both of them are great, but did not get a university education, just not because they couldn't afford it, but back then they didn't think it's a priority. Fortunately for me, at a really young age, I realized that science is my priority. So I pursued an undergraduate degree at the American University of Beirut, and I continued my graduate work at the United States in chemistry, specifically organic chemistry and then supramolecular chemistry. I spent essentially around 8 years in the States. However, there was always something missing. The Middle East was always missing. It's really hard for a person to have to choose where they want to live and where they have to work. So fortunately for me, in 2009, I got a call to join King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, that's KAUST, in Saudi Arabia. And believe it or not, when I called my mom to tell her, I'm moving back to Saudi Arabia, my mom is Saudi, and my dad is Lebanese. When I called her, she actually had given up on me coming back because she always tells me, you need to come back, but I tell her, no, I'm staying in the States. So when I told her, she actually fainted, true story. KAUST gave me the opportunity to do research, great research with excellent facilities back home at the Middle East. I love nanotechnology since reading about Richard Feynman, the great physicist who gave a lecture in 1959 and said to the world, there is plenty of room at the bottom. He talked about a swallowable doctor, something that's really tiny that you can swallow pretty much and it will fix any disease that you have. Back then, people laughed and said, oh, this is crazy, this is not going to happen. So I hope when I describe my research to you guys, you can see that we're now way closer. So, about my research, let's look at some of the stuff that nanotechnology can do for us. Now, nanotechnology, this is the science of the really small. So we're talking like 100,000 smaller than your own diameter of your hair. Now, with nanotechnology, you can control the bonds between atoms. So you can actually have a molecular motion at an atomic scale. So imagine you can have these really tiny particles that you can control, and you can have them move like a twist or rotate, by their own. So this is really awesome, and this is, as an organic chemist, chemist pushed me into more research and to do the research that I do today. So the future is the rise of the nanomachines, having the nanorobots, the nanoimpellers that can actually change the face of medicine that we know today. So for my own work, I focus on smart nanomachines. By smart nanomachines, I mean materials that you can control via a stimulus outside the body. So imagine if you have a light that you actually use different wavelengths, and you can control these nanoparticles. Or you can have a magnet that you can also control these nanoparticles with. So we're saying very tiny stuff that you can control from outside the body. So the major contribution, I believe, that I've done so far in my lab at KAUST is first pertaining to targeted drug delivery, and then to smart sensing. I focus on a very important topic that I think touches everybody in this room, because I'm sure, unfortunately, you have seen a family member, a friend, a colleague, or a neighbor suffer from the really bad side effects of chemotherapy. You know, this is because when you take the chemotherapy, it goes everywhere. It kills healthy things, healthy cells, before actual cancer cells. So what do we do about it? The answer is the nanomachines. So in this video, I show you how you can actually take a small nanoparticle or a nanomachine, design it by each person's needs, so the surface chemistry, the size, to actually have like a nano submarine, very small submarine that we can inject in your bloodstream. And actually, selectively, that nanomachine will not touch healthy cells. Rather, it will go directly to cancer cells. So it has these nice receptors that would actually catch it on and take it inside these cancer cells. And because these are smart, not any nanomachines, when you only shine light that's an external wavelength, you can actually explode or open up these submarines or nanomachines, and pretty much causing the death of only cancer and not normal tissue. Now imagine the same submarine, but a submarine with small hands that can go in and capture some biomarkers that you need to know about in order to treat any type of disease or anything else that you have in your body. So imagine these nanoparticles lighting up with different colors to give you a signal about a certain disease or a certain enzyme or a certain biomarker that you need to take care of. So this is also preventative, not just also targeted delivery. So you can do the smart sensing, not only the smart delivery. These nanoparticles can give you so much information that usually you wouldn't be able to get. This is what I do in my lab, I know. And the many labs do work with nanomedicine, but I think what makes my work different is that we work on very controlled multi-stimuli system, and most importantly, they are very biodegradable, meaning sustainability, which I'm sure L'Oreal is leading the way with sustainability. All the nanoparticles that we use are totally sustainable, totally biodegradable, and I think this is how my work will make it different and make it closer to the market. Now, of course, this would not be possible without a team supporting me, starting with my great parents, who although did not have the proper education, but were very supportive and very proud from day one. Of course, a great husband, Asim, who's an electrical engineer, but now knows how to write a total product synthesis because he's been exposed to enough organic chemistry. And of course, my great students and postdoc who do the actual hard job. And this, believe it or not, success for me at this age as a young scientist to be here today won't be possible without the support of a great university administration that I have, starting with a great professor, Jean Frichet. I hope he's here today, because he worked with me from day one, writing my papers and looking at my research. Also, we were very lucky to have a great president, Professor Jean-Louis Chameau, who made KAUST the destination. I have also the pushing of a great dean who always wants me to be better, Professor Yves Nanou, and of course a beautiful professor in our chemistry department, Professor Nicholas Hadji-Christidis. I hope he's here also today. So this is only possible because we had a vision in the Middle East. We had a great king, late King Abdullah, who had the vision of making the Middle East, of showing the good that could come out of the female and women in the Middle East. We have over 50% of female scientists at KAUST. So I know you guys probably know the Middle East of war, the Middle East of sorrow, the Middle East of wars and conflicts. However, I'm here today, and I came back from the States to the Middle East. This is a great proof that there is great hope in the Middle East. There is innovation in the Middle East. There is new culture, new science rising up in the Middle East. So please don't reduce the Middle East to the tragedies that it actually has. Please look at it as a place of a new hope. And this, of course, shining the light on a scientist from the Middle East won't be possible without the great effort that L'Oréal is doing, the jury, the committee, impressive work by the UNESCO. So I thank all of you for actually giving me the opportunity to be here today to represent the Middle East I know and love. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Un nouvel espoir au Moyen-Orient, une nouvelle ère pour la médecine, et peut-être même pour nous tous, un nouvel âge. Une des clés de cette évolution est le fruit des recherches de notre dernière intervenante. Il s'agit de matériaux multiféroïques.
Yeah, so multiferroics are certainly one candidate for further miniaturization of devices, and perhaps more than the miniaturization, the driver is that they will use an awful lot less energy than conventional devices that we have today.
Alors comme ça, ce mot ne vous dit peut-être pas encore grand-chose, pourtant, ça pourra peut-être vous changer la vie. Pour vous l'expliquer, voici celle qui a pu non seulement prouver leur existence en théorie, mais qui, avec l'aide de ses équipes, a inventé et mis en place les techniques permettant de produire ce matériau de demain. Voici la directrice du département théorie des matériaux à l'École polytechnique fédérale de Zurich, le professeur Nicolas Spalding.
Thank you, Alexandra, and good evening, everybody. From the Stone Age to the Bronze Age to the Iron Age, every major advance in human civilization has been driven by developments in materials. So much so that we name our historical eras after the materials that dominated their times. Today, we often say that we're living in the Silicon Age because silicon forms the core of the microelectronics that enables much of our modern way of life. Not only our computers and our mobile phones, but transportation, automation, communication, the list is endless. And over the past decades, we've improved the quality of silicon devices to an astonishing extent, enabling, for example, the transition from old desktop computers to sleek smartphones with amazing functionality, all with the same material, silicon, at their core. But this silicon revolution will soon be forced to come to an end. We start to run into fundamental physical limitations set by the size of the silicon atoms that make up the material. And this means that the steady march towards lighter, faster, cheaper products with more and more capabilities can't continue, at least within our current framework. Now, you might say, well, that's fine. The controls on my phone are already smaller than I can see without my reading glasses. But there's a deeper problem. Worldwide use of microelectronics is expanding so rapidly that by most projections, half of global energy will be consumed by information technologies within a couple of decades. And this is not sustainable. So we need to take the step beyond the Silicon Age. And to take that step, we need a new material. Without a new material, we're stuck in an energy bottleneck for human progress. And as a material scientist, my job is to develop that material. 20 years ago, I asked myself a question: why are there so few magnetic ferroelectrics? Now, that might not be the question that keeps many of you awake worrying at night, but as soon as I'd asked myself why there are so few magnetic ferroelectrics, finding the answer became somewhere between a passion and an obsession for me. And what I discovered was really very simple, that the kinds of atoms that make good magnetic materials, that make magnetic dipoles with north and south poles in a material, have different chemistries from atoms that make good ferroelectric materials. In a ferroelectric material, rather than having magnetic dipoles, one has electric dipoles with positive and negative charges. But what I was also able to show was that there's no fundamental reason why electric dipoles and magnetic dipoles should not coexist. And so, armed with this knowledge that magnetic ferroelectrics are at least in principle possible, my collaborators and I were able to develop an entirely new class of materials called multiferroics, which really are magnetic and ferroelectric. We did this in two ways: by designing new materials which contained in the same compound magnetic and ferroelectric atoms, like the bismuth iron oxide on the left, and by designing new crystal structures that trick or force magnetic atoms into becoming ferroelectric, like the yttrium manganese oxide on the right. So why is this important? Well, magnetic materials are currently the kind of sister to silicon in many of our technologies. Where silicon processes the information, magnetic materials remember it. And in particular, magnetic materials store information in the orientation of the magnetic dipoles: north up, south down, or north down, south up. And these represent the ones and zeros of digital electronics. And magnetic materials are extremely good at this because these magnetic data bits can be very small, they're very stable, and they're rather easy to detect. But magnetic technologies come at a cost. To produce the magnetic fields which are needed to control the magnetism, one needs a very bulky component, which is also very heavy. Perhaps you once injured your knee and went to the hospital for an MRI, and you remember what a very large machine was needed to generate the magnetic field. And these machines that make magnetic fields also use an awful lot of energy. So now imagine the possibilities offered by a material that's both magnetic and ferroelectric. Multiferroic materials maintain all of the advantages of magnetic materials, but in addition, they can be controlled using electric fields. And electric fields are efficient, they can be made of tiny components, and compared with magnetic fields, they use vanishingly small amounts of energy. Our new multiferroic materials are poised to enable new device paradigms, entirely new ways of designing technologies. Perhaps we're about to enter a new multiferroics age. Now, of course, there's more to material science than microelectronics, and there is more to human civilization than information technologies. And developments in materials are needed to address many of the most challenging global issues identified by the United Nations. Issues of climate change and the environment, for example, need new materials that can deliver clean, affordable alternative energies. We need developments in bio and biocompatible materials, such as the astonishing breakthroughs we heard already about from my colleagues, in order to support human health and in order to support persons with disabilities. And the development of these new materials will need the brightest, most creative minds of the next generation in order to frame the right questions and to figure out the answers. These are difficult problems, that are not going to be solved with knowledge from just one branch of science and engineering, but will need perspectives from all backgrounds, both scientific and cultural. Teams of researchers, teams of young people that think in different ways and approach problems from different angles. So, if we exclude scientists who come from countries that some of our governments find distasteful, if we build walls along our borders in order to keep them out, if we discourage an entire gender by letting them that they believe that they don't belong in science and engineering, if we don't collaborate with researchers that have different ethnicities or different nationalities than ourselves, then in my research team at least, there is nobody left. Nobody left to develop the materials that will make the world of tomorrow a better place. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is not my vision for our collective human future. Instead, I thank my family and my colleagues who never doubted that I belong here. I thank my brilliant, creative, and diverse research team who will solve the problems of the next generation. And I thank L'Oréal, UNESCO, and all of you who came here tonight for your support for women in science, and in turn, your support for a better future for humankind. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Dès qu'il est question de science, il est question de nous. Et ce que nous venons de découvrir ce soir, c'est peut-être demain. Cet avenir que vous nous créez, mesdames, c'est un espoir. Vous êtes des pionnières, vous êtes des aventurières, vous êtes des femmes de science. Ces lauréates 2017 ont été choisies parmi 156 nominations par un jury de 12 éminents scientifiques internationaux. Une lauréate par continent, pour célébrer la science dans sa diversité. Pour remettre les prix de cette 19e cérémonie, j'appelle Madame Flavia Schlegel, sous-directrice générale de l'UNESCO pour les secteurs des sciences exactes et naturelles, Monsieur Jean-Paul Agon, président de la Fondation L'Oréal et président directeur général de L'Oréal, évidemment, ça va sans dire, et le professeur Christian Amator, président du jury international L'Oréal UNESCO. Et les lauréates du prix L'Oréal UNESCO pour les femmes et la science 2017 sont donc, pour ses contributions à l'étude d'objets célestes de faible luminosité dissimulés dans la pénombre de l'univers, le professeur Maria Teresa Ruiz. Ses contributions remarquables dans le développement des nouveaux polymères aux applications dans les domaines de l'électronique et du biomédical, le professeur Zenan Bao. Ses contributions pionnières à l'électronique quantique et atomique, notamment la création de transistors à l'échelle de l'atome, permettant des grandes avancées vers l'ordinateur quantique, le professeur Michel Simons. pour ses contributions à la création de matériaux intelligents et hybrides dédiés à l'administration de médicaments et à la détection du stress oxydant dans les cellules vivantes, le professeur Nivin Kashyap. Pour ses travaux révolutionnaires et pluridisciplinaires permettant de prédire, décrire et produire des nouveaux matériaux à la fois magnétiques et ferroélectriques, le professeur Nicola Spalding. Ce soir, nous honorons les travaux et la carrière de 5 chercheuses éminentes dont les travaux rayonnent déjà internationalement. Cette reconnaissance est le fruit d'un long travail, mais ces lauréates, elles aussi, ont un jour été des chercheuses débutantes. La Fondation L'Oréal et l'UNESCO ne font pas que récompenser des femmes de science confirmées. Leur but est également d'encourager et de soutenir celles qui seront les grandes scientifiques de demain. Chaque année, 15 chercheuses venues de tous les continents sont identifiées par un jury scientifique et accompagnées par la Fondation L'Oréal. Ce sont les talents de demain, les Rising Talents. Si la science est un espoir, elles sont les espoirs de la science. Mesdames et messieurs, merci d'applaudir comme il se doit les Rising Talents 2017. For the picture. Mesdames et messieurs, je vous avais dit que nous avions un grand privilège. Ce soir, nous avons eu la chance de rencontrer 5 chercheuses exceptionnelles. Grâce à elles, nous avons pu apercevoir ce que pourra être notre avenir. Mieux connaître notre univers, mieux soigner et réparer les corps, construire de l'électronique plus puissante et plus durable encore. Mais ces 5 lauréates et ces Rising Talents nous font un cadeau plus précieux encore, l'optimisme. Nous vivons une période troublée. Il n'est pas toujours facile de croire que demain sera un jour meilleur. L'optimisme est parfois accusé d'être naïf, surtout ici en France. Pourtant, l'optimisme, c'est un choix. C'est celui de croire que nous pouvons collectivement construire ces lendemains meilleurs. Ces femmes de science nous les prouvent par leurs travaux. Grâce à elles, l'optimisme n'est plus une naïveté, c'est un choix informé, car elles sont la preuve que les femmes de science ont le pouvoir de changer le monde. Merci d'être venus les célébrer et les soutenir. Bonne soirée à tous.
This mountain road just keeps on climbing.
Plein.
Well, I fear I may have overslept my bounds. I probably should resume my round. Now that
Évidemment, il n'y aurait pas de célébration sans au moins partager un verre. Nous sommes donc ravis de vous accueillir au cocktail qui se déroule au premier étage.
twisted road just keeps on winding. Well, I fear I may have overslept my bounds. I probably should resume my round. Now that we feel good back in town. Way down below, these feet are crying.